and welcome Kim. And I think, and we have Robert Lennox. Are you representing South Burlingame, Rob?
It says guest Robert Lennox, so no, obviously not.
So you're just here as a public member?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Wait. I got an email from Shannon saying she was sick with a mild case of food poisoning, asking Rob to replace her since she can't dial in. So Rob, I don't know if you've got that. She CC'd me.
No,
so,
I did not. So yeah, I'll be representing South Burlingame.
That sounds great.
Interrupt. Are we recording this?
We are recording at this point, and now I'm going to do a quick roll call. I'm just going to say your name and go down the list. And if I miss anybody, speak up at the end. I've got Katie Daly from Arnold Creek. Bruce Kester from Ash Creek is excused. Becky's excused. Do we have Fran Laird? Okay, Fran hasn't come. Do we have Crestwood, Tony Hansen? All right, he's not here. We have George Veranos from Far Southwest.
Yes.
Thank you. We have Janet will be there for Hayhurst. Marie
No, I'll be board secretary. I think Kendall at this point is.
She's a representative, but if Hayhurst needed representation, you're from there.
Oh, well, I have a.
Go ahead.
That's okay.
Okay. Hillsdale is Marie Tyval. Homestead is Jackie Phillips. Maplewood is Ron Buren. Marshall Park is it Mike Charles? Is that what it is? Okay.
That's right.
Good, welcome. We don't have anybody from Multnomah, do we? Okay. We have Rob Lennox from South Burlingame. I don't think we have anybody from South Portland. We have Nancy Seaton from Swirl, and we have Gary Rundy for land use, but also West Portland since Debbie Hall isn't here. All right.
Leslie, hi, Leslie, this is Murphy. So even though I'm Watershed, I'm also Multnomah Village. I'll take on the responsibility for that.
Oh, great. Thank you. Then Multnomah is represented by Murphy. Thank you, Murphy.
You didn't
I volunteer.
You didn't mention me in your roll call, Leslie.
Steve, how could I have missed you? But I did. All right, Steve Mullenix is here from the Parks Committee. My apologies.
And Don Bach is there from the business.
And Don Bach is from the Hillsdale Neighborhood Association.
No, Hillsdale Business and Professional Association.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. You're right. You're from the Business and Professional Association, Don. Thank you. Now let's give Janet a moment to check her notes to see that she has all that she wants.
Right, and Kim Silverman, did we call Kim Silverman's name?
Kim Silverman is from
Public Safety.
Public Safety. Thank you. Okay. And we have Patty, who I think is here to listen in for the Schools Committee. Okay. Then Lee, if you will mute everybody just for a few minutes, you and I can go through the Payroll Protection Act.
Okay, I gotta unmute you.
Anything? I'm going to speak and help you all grasp what we've grasped in the last week or so, and then Lee's going to talk about it from a Treasury point of view, and then we'll go to the benefits conversation and then the burdens conversation. The way this works is the federal government wanted to get money out to make sure that people were going to be paid in their jobs. So they came up with something called the Payroll Protection Act or the CARES Act Payroll Protection Plan. At our last meeting, Murphy suggested we look into this, and we did that by board motion. Subsequent to that meeting, Lee and I took some time to work with our local bank, which is Umpqua. And the way this program works, the federal money comes to the Small Business Administration, and then the Small Business Administration pushes the documents out to the local banks and the money. So it's a sort of three-tiered thing: federal government, Small Business Association, then your local bank, and Umpqua happens to be ours. after we looked at the application and what we had to certify, we filled the application out and mailed it to the bank, not really expecting too much. Within 2 days, the application was accepted. So then we had to go back to the bank and discuss with the bank what they would give us as advice with relationship to this particular loan. The rules allow the president to sign a contract, so that's why I signed on behalf of SWNI. But of course, no contract or loan is valid unless the board acts on it. And that's what our job is today, to decide, do we want to approve getting the loan or do we want to disapprove getting the loan? Now, the PPP loan tells us that we must use the money to meet payroll, rent, and utilities. Here's the key part: for 8 weeks after we receive the money. If we were to sign the loan docs on Monday, we've been led to believe that we might have the money as early as Thursday or Friday. So that means that we would have to use those funds for the next payroll, rent, and utilities that come in the next 8 weeks. That's what is allowed under the PPP Act. If we use that money that way, then we certify to the bank and to the SBA that we've used the funds exactly the way the rules expect us to use them, and then they forgive the debt. So this is a loan which is forgivable if we follow the exact guidelines of the SBA and Umpqua Bank, who's managing it for them. So we certify and attach our documents about what money we used and whom we paid, and would show how we'd use that money. And then they come back and tell us that the debt is forgivable. And then it becomes a grant, and it's basically free money to us. There is no reason that I can think of that we can't use these funds exactly the way the federal government wants us to use them and be able to certify them. And then we wouldn't have to repay the loan. If we were to have to repay this loan, it's a 1% interest loan. There is no debt payment for 6 months, and you have to pay it off within 2 years. But at this moment, at least with the regulations that I sent to all of you yesterday and today, it appears that as long as we follow those guidelines, it's very unlikely that our loan wouldn't be forgivable. We've informed Civic Life that we've applied for this loan because we do get money from Civic Life, and they were actually encouraging in terms of applying for the loan. Now, part of the reason that I think we stand in good stead on this is because we aren't at all sure what our budget will be next year. Civic Life has turned in their budget, but now the city's going through its budget process, and they've lost a lot of money in the last quarter. So we don't have any idea yet whether we'll get funded the way we were last year or whether we'll be cut. So that's part of
point of information. The next year, when does the contract end?
2 years.
No, so our current contract ends when? June 30th?
Okay. Let me talk about Civic Life in just a minute. I promise I'll come back to it, Rob.
No, I'm asking for a point of information, which is allowed in Robert's rules. I'm asking for specific information. When does our current contract end?
I'm sorry, I can't give it to you. We have a fiscal contract every year with Civic Life.
So Sylvia, when does our current contract end?
It ends on June 30th, Rob.
Okay.
And then
so you do know. I'm just asking a question.
Of course I know, but I like to try to finish. With Civic Life, I want to talk about monies that SWNI gets. We have sort of 3 revenue streams. One is we give it a Civic Life grant that funds a lot of the activities and the payroll that we have for the coalition and the neighborhoods. The second stream of money is money that we actually raise ourselves. And this year we were supposed to raise a little over $53,000 to live within our operating budget that we put out for all of you and for Civic Life. We're a little short on that money because we have lost the opportunity to raise some funds, both through donations, through the spring cleanup, and other fundraising activities that we had sort of planned on. If we take the PPP money, it will replace some of the money that we were getting from Civic Life for payroll, utilities, and rent. What that means is we'll have some civic life money left over. There is nothing that we've seen in our contract that we've had for several years that says that we can't use our civic life money for other purposes within our fiscal year in our neighborhood association. So if we use the PPP money to meet payroll, we will have money left over, and we can use that money for the benefit of the neighborhoods and to offset COVID impacts for SWNI officers and some of the groups in the neighborhoods. So that's how we're thinking about it. If we got the money, we'd use the money from civic life that we didn't use for payroll for other purposes in the neighborhood, which the neighborhoods collectively could decide what they wanted to do with. One last point, and then I'll go to Lee. If for some reason that we can't foresee, the government changed the rules about what made the loan forgivable. Let's say we got the money, we spent it exactly the way they said, and then they changed the rules down the line because the Congress is in the process of developing more rules with respect to the monies that they're sending out. If it changed it and made part of the debt or all of the debt unforgivable, we have sufficient money in the board funds. That means our particular funds, not civic life funds, to pay that loan off should we need to do it. And that money's been there for 3 or 4 years, so it's available as a backstop should we ever need it. Okay, now I'm gonna let Lee go ahead and
You got
talk.
2 hands up. You got 2 hands up.
Okay, which hands are they, do you know?
Murphy and Charlie.
All right, Murphy, let me see if I can unmute you. Can you unmute Murphy?
I unmuted me.
Okay, all right.
I
go
have
ahead.
complete control over my muteness. I'm selectively mute. So my question is, it's just sort of a point of clarification. You said of something to the effect of, we have to use the fund for 8 weeks, in 8 weeks. Is that the very, we get it on the 1st and we have to use it within the next 8 weeks, or is it the next 8 months?
No,
Or
it's just,
sometime, or?
it's very specific. At the federal level, they're considering extending that 8-week period, but since maybe we'll take it at this point in time, we're stuck with the 8 weeks rule.
But it's 8 weeks from the time that we cash the check, and then that starts the 8 weeks?
Exactly. That's
I hear
exactly
you.
8 weeks. Yes, and there was some question about whether we could use the money after June 30th, and in talking with the banker, we were told we could use it for 8 weeks after we receive the money. If that goes past June 30th in our normal fiscal year, we can use it. So I want you all to know that. Do you want to unmute Charlie, Lee?
I think I'm unmuted.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I just want to clarify, I've helped several clients with these loans, and to your point about what it must be, the money must be used for, you are eligible based upon your prior year payroll, rents, utilities, benefits, which also counted as payroll costs, and any kind of mortgage interest. That produces the number for which you are eligible to borrow. Your use of the money is unlimited. You can use it for whatever you want. It's a matter of, if you want to have it forgiven, it has to be used for the specific payroll, benefits, rents, etc. So it doesn't really matter what the money is used for.
If you don't want it to be forgivable.
Correct.
Okay. Welcome, David. David Martin's joined us. Welcome. Okay. Shall we let Lee go ahead and make his presentation? And then Jackie, I'll take you and Mike Charles, because we're covering the same material.
Okay, just briefly, after your motion, I applied for this loan, and in doing it, I consulted with the bank and Nancy and Sylvia and Leslie, and also the executive committee. I sent you most of the application. I couldn't send the supporting documents because their payroll information was that we just can't release. And I looked into redacting it, but it would be nothing left. The forms that were attached are payroll records. They wanted quarterly payroll records for 2019, all quarters, some payroll information for this year around February 15th, and some health insurance records. So I think Leslie's gone over most of the other stuff. I see we're severely impacted by the COVID crisis. For example, we've not been able to hold a cleanup. Contributions are down. We have a list of things. And so I think we qualify that way. And as Leslie said,
So point of information, you just kind of passed over that. What are the specific items that we're impacted by? So the cleanup is one. Because we can't see the document, so this is a question for me.
Okay, the cleanup is one. We sent out that flyer on the COVID crisis. Contributions are down. And Janet, can you?
Yeah, Lee, thanks. I just unmuted myself. So definitely the cancellation of the spring cleanup. Donations are down to SWNI, and that's a similar experience to other nonprofit organizations. We had additional costs for the purchase of equipment and software to support staff and teleworking. So we had unanticipated equipment and software costs. And then we had training time. That's one thing that in terms of payroll and how we allocate time for our staff, we had additional time needed for staff to learn new software and to support office systems and programs. So we've used a lot of Sharon's time during the past few weeks to help get other staff up to speed to do their teleworking tasks. And then finally, we had the COVID-19 resource guide where we devoted lots of staff time, printing and mailing expenses, which we calculated at about $5,500 associated with that. Sylvia was looking into potentially BES, potentially reimbursing us, but I don't, I'll let Sylvia speak to that. But that was something as a board we agreed we would spend our own board fund on if we didn't have any source of reimbursement. So those are kind of the immediate list. Is that?
So question, you said flyer and the COVID response, those are the same things?
The COVID-19 resource guide.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the flyer and the COVID-19 is the same thing. So we have donations are down, support equipment costs, training of new software and staff are working offsite, and COVID-19. So have we had any layoffs from this?
We have not.
No furloughs, no.
But Rob, our budget may very well be affected next.
So that's June 30th, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
8 weeks from now, that's only a week and a quarter. If they approve the next week, that's only a week and a few days, just to be clear. So this is 8 week program. So if it's approved by Friday, we're talking 1 week. I just want to make sure everybody understands the limitations of this loan is 8 weeks.
Right. I think that's a very good point to make. Also, the board voted for a cost of living increase for the employees, and we've not raised enough money through donations to pay for that. So, and it would be fall right within the payroll expectations of the federal program. So we're behind on that, and this money could be used to pay the cost of living increase that the board voted on earlier.
So what was that cost? Cost of living increase was $2,500, as I recall.
Sylvia, no, it's much more than that.
Oh,
Sylvia, you have to unmute yourself.
I'd like to get in a comment here.
Is this Mike Charles?
This is Don Bach.
Oh, okay, just a second. Let Sylvia answer the question, and then Don, I'll call on you.
So the COLA that we talked about last fall, we gave half in the fall, and then we were going to reconsider in the spring after we looked at our budget. So it would be $2,500 for all employees, just not per employees, for the whole cost of living. So when I'm adding this up, it looks to be around $15,000 to $16,000.
Okay, point of information, what do you mean by $15,000 to $16,000? What does that include?
That's what the loss is through the COVID experience that we've had so far.
So I'm saying $2,500 and $5,500 for the COVID resources.
We expected to bring in another $5,000 from the cleanup, and probably another 2,000 in advertising that we didn't see yet.
Okay. So we're looking at,
Rob, I think she's answered your questions. I want to go.
no,
Jack,
I'm gonna I want,
all right, we have Jackie and Don. Jackie,
I'm on
do
a
you want-
Zoom call.
Don, do you
so
want
I would
to?
like to quantify this. I didn't hear her, so.
We
could
will
you
finish
please-
quantifying later, Rob, when we get to
No,
this.
no, this,
I'm sorry, you're out of order. I'm going to let Don speak, and then I'm going to let Jackie speak.
under Robert's rules, these questions.
Lee,
Yeah,
go ahead, Jackie.
I just want to speak to Rob's point. Those were expenses beyond payroll costs that we were talking about. And if in fact what funds we expend that meet the rules, such as payroll and additional losses, what we don't spend, you could just consider it as a loan. So it wouldn't be forgivable. So that's the difference.
All right. Don Bach?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things we should think about is employing each neighborhood to have software that would give us capability of doing these meetings, because that's an ongoing need. And put that in your budget as something that we should be, looking for. Either they may have already purchased it, and or we should get it, and things akin to that. Each neighborhood, what their needs might be.
I agree. The list of things that we might use any excess funds for can be determined by the board if we get the loan. If we don't get the loan, there's no point in talking about excess funds because we don't have them. And the board is underfunded in terms of its part of the budget that it's supposed to provide. So really the focus of all of this is to determine whether we want to support going for the loan or not. But in order to go forward and have this additional conversation, Lee, will you read the motion that you're bringing as treasurer?
okay. I make the following motion. The SWNI board approves the loan application and execution of the SBA loan document for $66,332 under the CARES Act Payroll Protection Plan by the president and current treasurer. The loan shall be used in accordance with the PPP guidelines with the intent that the loan will become forgivable. If any of the loan is deemed unforgivable, the board shall retain the money as a low-cost loan at 1% repayable within 2 years of receipt of the money. The board has sufficient money in its reserve to repay any non-forgivable loan fund. The board directs the president to form an oversight committee to oversee and to report to the board on the SBA PPP loan.
I second. That's Janet.
Thank you. Now we can have a discussion and go back into more detail, but what I would like to suggest is a change to that motion and say in the line that says the board can retain the money.
As a president, you can suggest a change to a motion. Someone
I'm
else
going
can.
to comment to this. The loan, the
my
motion
God.
should say that the motion should say that any monies that isn't used in accordance with the PPP standards can be returned to the SBA, because that is another provision of the SBA loan. If we can't use it, we can return the monies and then we don't have to incur any loan at all. So we have choices on this. Let's go to a discussion.
Michael had his hand up.
Okay, Michael, what would you like to?
Oh, that's okay. I was going to ask how much the loan was for, but Lee already answered that. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
And
Let's
Katie's
go
got her hand up.
All right, Katie.
Mute. Unmute. Great. Leslie, you said at one point that you could use the ONI grant going forward for other purposes than salary. I have not read the ONI contract in detail, as Sylvia made clear to me earlier today in an email, but it is your opinion that we can use monies from ONI for other than what they typically stipulate, which are salaries.
Sylvia, do you want to answer that? Thanks, good question.
So the Civic Life grant covers things like making sure that we have an office, that we have some staff, that we have our insurance, that we, there's line items that we can expend. So because we adopted an operating budget that in a sense, just to meet the bare minimums of what we wanted to achieve, after we received the Civic Life grant, there was $53,000 that the board had to use. So we had to say which way. If we use the money for the full-time employee expenses and keep part-time expenses out of Civic Life, then that frees up some of that money that we could use towards paying for the printing and postage of our newsletter, paying for the rent that the board usually pays for, paying for an all household mailing, that we usually consider at the end of the year. So we have to spend within line items that the agreement stipulates, but our board has taken on that burden. If we shift the funds, for some of the full-time payroll expenses, we can move them in towards paying some of those other responsibilities. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
All right, any other questions at this moment before we go on to talking about the burdens? I don't see any questions. All right, any hands raised? All right, here's what I'd like to suggest. I know all of you have looked at this in different ways. So what I'd like to do is give each of you a minute to comment on what you think are the benefits of getting this loan. And then we'll take the thorny subject a bit later about what burdens you think we might have in getting this loan. So if you want to speak to the benefits, raise your hand and we'll give you a minute to comment on the benefits.
Janet and Jackie have their hands up.
Janet, would you like to speak to the benefits?
Sure, yeah. One of the benefits that's really clear is we resume in-person meetings when we have the authority to do that, which may be a few months away. We're going to need to think about larger space for our meetings, for any meeting that would be under the umbrella of SWNI. So we're going to have to look at more room cost at Multnomah Arts Center. So larger rooms, probably at greater cost. So that's one thing that we could potentially, we have this opportunity with the Arts Center to prepay our rent. Sylvia has done that in the past and locked in good rates. But certainly we're going to need to look at larger space. And Sylvia, go ahead and correct me on this one as well. In just a sec, I had one more point, which was costs for purchase of equipment, software. As John mentioned, he talked about neighborhood associations, but as this rolls out, if we have more need for teleworking, we may have more cost associated with supporting staff with both equipment and software. So those are two ideas I wanted to share.
Okay, Sylvia.
So just point of clarification, we don't prepay rent. What we do is, in order to reserve the rooms for all of our committee meetings and events that we have on our action plan, we have to pay to reserve those rooms. So that rent money, again, could come out of the Civic Life grant so that we can secure that.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Let's see here. We have Steve Molinex. Would you like to unmute yourself and comment? And Janet, just for a second, Janet, we have both Marie Tai Mai has come on and Debbie Hall has joined us as well.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, Janet just rattled off a list of perhaps unforeseen expenses that we could incur. I can think of possibly some others, such as using staff time to support neighborhood meetings. Okay, I know that Bridal Mile is going to be using Don's time to help us. Somebody needs to
Lee,
mute.
Lee, can you mute everybody except
Yeah,
Steve? Because there's too much background noise. All right, go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's not necessary that we try to list all those possible unforeseen expenses now. Okay, I think the key point is that this allows us the flexibility it gives us a contingency to cover such unforeseen expenses.
Thank you. Now, Marie, will you unmute yourself and make your comment?
Yeah, my comment is this, is that the city is going to have a budget shortfall, and we have at least 2, if not 3 new commissioners coming in. We still know the uncertainty of civic life is there. And so I think that having this money in hand is a fairly low risk, and it has nothing but benefits to us.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Now, I see that Marie Tyval's hand is up. Marie, do you wish to make a comment? Marie, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Point of information, what did Shook state that he would do with our contract?
Sylvia, go ahead.
So I contacted him, and he's got a form that we can work with him to say, this is how we're gonna spend less here in payroll, but here's where we would spend it for rent and insurance and those kinds of things. So we would make an agreement, just revise it to let him know how COVID has impacted us and how we would spend the rest of those funds.
So he's requiring a agreement? What does that mean?
Well, it was just a form to say, this is what we're impacting, this is how we're shifting some of our expenses. It's all within the grant agreement. And
so are we able to get
Are
we able to see a copy of that form that's going to the city?
Sure, if we do this, then we'll share it.
Okay, we have, thank you, Marie, I appreciate it. Lee, would you lower the hands of the people that have spoken like Steve so that I can keep track of what are fresh questions? Thank you. And Jackie, do you want to speak more or not? Okay, didn't hear. All right, John?
Yes, I do, Leslie.
All right, go ahead.
Me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So I want to briefly say that I have questions about that I want to be able to go back to about this Oversight Committee that was mentioned in the.
Okay.
So just so we get back there. And I would say that taking these funds is probably a very prudent thing to do. We are going to experience difficulties from COVID for a very long time. This is not going to be over June 30th or even in September. So with the responsibility to our communities, I think it's very prudent to take these funds. A 1% loan is very good money. And so I think it's a prudent thing to do.
Thank you. I've got John Gibbon, then Ron, and then Robert. John, do you want to go first? John Gibbon, are you there? He may have walked away. Ron, go ahead and unmute yourself.
No, John's
I'm
there.
sorry. I had to close my window. I'm too close to the freeway. Might create noise. One of the things I'd like to see, a benefit that we should consider, is during this COVID time, till at least we can get to a point where we can support meetings in the neighborhood and support meetings everywhere, is following through what we usually do in June and what we did with the mailer that the county asked us to put out. And we should really give consideration to keeping up an all household communication line through newspaper through the next few months, at least till we get back to whatever normal is, so we can tell people what is coming and when we can start up again more fully. So that's more funding than we've done in the past. And then I do have a question for Sylvia. In the past, we often, I'm dating myself, spent money in the last month of the year in order to, as I understood it, to protect our monies from that, then it was owning. But that's not really a requirement with the way we're taking money in now. Is that correct? Or
I'm not sure what you're asking, but the question is, will we spend down civic life funds? And I would say yes. And we've always spent down civic life funds to the penny.
okay.
All right, the next person on
Point
the
of
list.
information, what does that mean? You've always been.
It means that we have a grant. And as I said before, our operating budget, is usually $53,000 short from what
Sure.
after your civic life. So usually always we spend down the funding that civic life gives us.
So does that mean we're bankrupt?
No.
No. If you look at the balance sheet, Rob.
I understand. This is a rhetorical question.
Okay.
It means we have money.
Yes,
Right?
the board has
We
money.
spend the grant down to
At the
zero.
end of the last fiscal year, we estimated that we had $80,000. The board
Right.
has $80,000. Okay.
Right?
Good
So-
question. Very good question. It's Ron Beering's time to ask a question. Ron, if you go ahead. Ron?
Oh, yep, I'm here. Sorry. Forgive me if I missed this, but is there a chance that if we get this money, that Civic Life would penalize us in some way and not give us as much? Or
We've not heard anything like that. And since Sylvia talked with Shook yesterday, who's our contract manager in Civic Life, there was no indication that we'd be penalized if we used our Civic Life money in a slightly different way than we have in the past. All right.
Thank you.
Point of
Yes.
information, can we let Sylvia speak on that?
I think Sylvia would say the same thing.
I don't care. I'm
I
asking
wanna-
for information.
I just want to clarify. I think his question was more to the point of, if we accept grant money, would they next year reduce our funding based on the fact that we accepted this grant? In my experience, no. They look at us as a nonprofit organization, and any money that we bring in leverages what the city gives us. And we are a nonprofit organization first, not a city agency. So usually that's what they're after, is they want us to leverage the fund. The contract is really the grant agreement is based on negotiations with Civic Life for all of the coalitions to do basic level, like opening the office, covering basic communications of core staff. So that's what that funding is for.
Okay, the next person on the list is Don Bach. Don, would you like to make a comment? You have to unmute yourself. Don? Don, you have to unmute yourself. Just a second. Well, wait till he does. There you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. First of all, I'd like to ask Robert to accumulate his questions and answer them at once. You keep interrupting everyone, and you speak when it's your turn, but not all the time.
No, under Robert's rules, I
Second-
have a
second-
question. I can ask for point of
Yes,
information,
when
which is
you're
about
recognized,
specific.
when you're recognized by the chair. So the point that I'd like to make is, number one, I really appreciate the effort that's been done
If you look at Robert,
in securing this grant.
We're
And
letting Don speak. Go ahead, Don.
I really appreciate the effort that's been done to put together this grant. I think it gives us a lot of flexibility. I think we should be careful not to say we're going to spend the money X, Y, Z, because things like this over time change in terms of what's possible and what the needs are, so that the Oversight Committee should be looking at this on a regular basis and reporting to the board, and not take a lot of you know, we got to do this because this motion says this or that, but rather be flexible as we go forward in terms of how to best use this, you know, kind of a gift from God that's been given to us.
Thank you very much. Katie, I've got Rob Lennox next and then you. So Rob, now it's your turn.
So first I want to state that under Robert's Rules of Order, I am allowed to ask for point of information at any time. I'm allowed to interrupt the speaker to ask for a point of information at any time, period. Okay?
No, you be recognized.
Yes.
Chair to do
No,
that.
no, you
Yes,
you
can
rule
do.
up Robert's
You have
Rules
to
of
be recognized by the chair and then you can ask your point of information.
No,
And you're right. You can ask
you're
point of information
incorrect.
so long as you're recognized by the chair. Go ahead and make comments on
You're
the other.
incorrect. I'm just going to state that this is incorrect.
I'm overruling you right now. Let's continue the conversation about the loan.
No, I'm
Yes, I'm going to overrule you if you want
you
to
don't
comment.
have allowed to, you don't have the authority to overrule a board
You
member.
have the authority.
You have the ability to make a motion. You have
Lee,
ability to make an order. You can't
Lee.
overrule me.
I'm
If you
sorry.
mute
Do you
me-
wish to make a
if you
comment
mute
on
me-
the phone?
If you mute me, then you are basically breaking Robert's Rules of Order for which we are abided by.
I'm
So,
sorry. I
so
have
I'm
the
a-
right. You're being disruptive.
no, I'm not being disruptive.
Yes,
I'm
because
allowed
I've
to
asked
ask
you to move
information.
on and ask
No.
your questions about the loan. So go ahead and move on and ask your
So-
questions about the loan.
So I'm just responding to Don Bach's assertion that I've been disrespectful. I haven't. I've asked specific informations about this loan. It is point of information. If you look in Robert's Rules, I'm allowed to do this. You're not allowed to mute me just because you don't like what I'm doing. This is not a dictatorship. We're all allowed to speak. So the fact that you guys are muting me whenever you want to is not correct.
No, we're not
Please.
doing that. When you run over a minute, when we said you have a minute to speak, we're using the mute button.
I can
You've
ask
run
for,
over a minute, we're going to take.
I can ask for points of information. Go look it up. Go look it up, Don. Go for it. Look up point of information right now and share.
That
So-
we're not going to go through that.
so-
What we're going to do
So
is focus
basically, I'm
Lee?
gonna make, I got a minute. Give me my
on-
minute.
You've already
You're inter-
used your minute. You can
No,
come
I have
back.
not used my
Yes,
minute.
you have
I've
used-
asked for points of information, was not my minute to speak.
It is.
No, it is
Because you've
not.
been spending 2 or 3 minutes talking about points of order. Just let us
Points
finish.
of information is not points of order. I can ask for points of information anytime because you guys are talking continuously between Sylvia, between you, between Sam, between other people. You guys are having conversations about this. I'm trying to come up to speed. So to come up to speed, I'm asking for specific information. Like, when is this due? When is that due? What is the cost of the organization? These are specific information. In fact, there's emails that I saw right before I walked into the meeting that I haven't had a chance to read because it's a meeting at 4:30 and the meetings, the emails have come about before I entered the meeting. I have obligations as a citizen. So my question, I guess my point is, we are a community. I represent my members of South Bergen Member Association, and there's many of them that own restaurants. There's many of them that work in industries where they are no longer classified as essential members. These are people that aren't working. These are people that basically their employers have applied for this PPP grant. I just want all of us to think about the fact that we have a grant that has given us money to ensure, at least through June 30th, right, that we have money. So we're talking about 2 weeks in this application. We're talking about 2 weeks of potential funds to do what the PPP has asked us to do, which is to make whole of the employees of their funds. 75% of the loan is to make them whole. And God forbid any of these people aren't paid, because I would feel totally bad, and I'd feel as bad as I am for my neighbors that aren't working. But we need to consider the fact that there are real people out here that are applying for these loans that want the money, that need the money, that have actual mortgages that are being paid, not to pay for a
That's
cleanup.
1 minute.
or-
We're at 1 minute on the comment.
That's fine. Not
All right. Thank you, Rob. And we'll come back to you and let you finish your comment after I get everybody else who wants to comment heard. I would say correct a couple of things. If we were to apply for this money on Monday and we were to get it on Friday, which is the 15th, we have 8 full weeks of payroll, rent, and utilities past the 15th to use the money, not just 2 weeks. I want to clarify that because I spent a good deal of time talking to the banker about it. And I sent you all the Small Business Administration's FAQs, which explain that. So we would have a full 8 weeks. The other thing I asked the banker about is how many people were applying for the loans. And he said he had several through his banks, but there was money available and there was time for other people to apply for loans. People have until the 30th of June to apply for loans. So I just want to correct that before I go on to the next person who has a question. Okay, Katie Daly, you've waited a long time. Go ahead.
Thank you. And notwithstanding the moral decision on whether or not we should take money, that it may take it out of the mouths of people that are starving or will end up living in their cars, I'm not talking about that. You have set this up into, are you positive or are you negative, and what are those points? Mine are not with the positive or the negative, but with the process. The one thing that I've noted that I'm uncomfortable with, and that is that Lee is giving certification that all of these inputs to the application are accurate, and he is on the line with the full penalties and force of federal law to go down in the event that there is a mistake in our application. Second, Leslie is signing the application, and she is a volunteer and a temporary, because it's an annual vote and an annual position. And I believe that Sylvia, as the executive director and paid member of the SWNI organization, should be signing and submitting the documentation. That's my one process thing. My second process thing.
We're at 1 minute if we want to continue.
Oh, for God's sakes. Okay, I'll talk faster. The other one is that I spent my entire career reviewing loan and transaction documentation. If you are asking us to approve the loan application without the supporting documentation, and I understand you had a problem with the bank giving you portal access to everything, without that, I am not going to be able to vote for, whether I vote against or whether I abstain because of a lack of information to make a prudent decision and support this is different whether I think this is a good idea or not.
Okay. Thank you. Lee, do you want to comment on her concern about whether the numbers and the certifications we've made are accurate or not?
Well, first of all, I got all the numbers from the tax forms. So we have the tax forms, we have the payroll records. I couldn't send those out. We have the insurance statement. So I am comfortable with that. And I think I will be involved in the implementation of this. And I trust the people of SWNI to do it, there's a lot of other people who will be on the hook if we don't do this right, and I think we can, and it'll be pretty simple. And we're gonna, one thing I forgot in my report is that when talking to the banker, we're gonna set up a separate bank account for these funds so we can account for them more accurately.
Okay, there's one thing I wanted to say. We don't have the loan documentation. We're not going to have the loan documentation until Monday. You know, Katie, from your background, you don't get to change the loan documentation. All you do is get to sign it. You know that, and I know that. Would I like the loan documentation to be here? Yes. And if we can get to the bank early on Monday morning and get a set of loan docs out to everybody, I will, because we do have time until midnight. I will say to you, my volunteer time stops at 8 o'clock at night. I will not be doing this at midnight. So we could get the loan docs out then. I mean, sometime during the day, so if you had reservations. But remember, everybody, whatever those loan docs say, we have to sign on the dotted line, whatever they say. What I will be looking for is the language that says if we follow their rules and regulations, the loan is forgivable. So we don't have any unforeseen consequences. So that's what I would say about that. Now, Marie has been waiting to chat or talk, and so I'd like to recognize Marie.
Oh, I just wanted to confirm, because I've learned a lot about Robert's Rules of Order, that Rob is absolutely correct, and that to not honor point of information is suppressing comments in a highly, highly inappropriate way that we continue to enable. I mean, it just, for the record, again, people are not allowed to speak according to Robert's Rules of Order. I just wanted to make that clear once again.
Thank you for your comment. Now, Murphy, you're the next person who's got her hand up. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
there you go.
hitting the wrong button. So the first thing I got to say is in reference to Robert Lennox, if you're going to mute Lennox, then you have to mute Daly when she goes over a minute too, and you have to mute me if I go over a minute too.
Okay.
So what I
Thank
want to
you.
say is, I believe that the Fed money does not have a finite amount of money to distribute. What they have is regulations on to whom it can be distributed. Therefore, if we fall into the category of yes, as well as whatever the local restaurant is or other local businesses are, if they fall into the category, they will get the money. The money comes out of our future taxes. So I think that in taking the money, if we apply and we're accepted and the money is given.
Murphy, that's 1 minute, sorry.
Thank you.
All right.
Good. That's it.
Thank you. Now, we only talked about the benefits. We talked more about benefits and burdens, but I want to give some time. If people are concerned about the burdens, this is a good time to raise your issues about the burdens. I think Katie said we don't have the loan documents, and that's a burden to us as an association. Fair enough. Completely fair. Anybody else concerned about the forgivability of the debt, the length of a loan and when it would be forgiven, or any other questions on the burden side? We will have additional accounting. We'll have to do reporting. We'll have to do documentation of how we spent the money. So those are additional burdens that I can think of. But any concern about the burdens of taking this, now is the time to raise your blue hand and we'll let you speak to it. Okay, Robert Lennox.
So
Rob?
I just want to state that, well, first off, thank you, Murphy. But on a true point, we should, if we're going to do this, there has to be a committee that overviews whether we remove them, whether we take loans from it, how it's distributed. I mean, we can't just have this as a free-for-all that we have a loan here of $67,000 where it gets to distribute it or pay however we want. There's implications to the organization, and I haven't seen any documentation on how that's going to be done. So it's not part of the motion. It's not part of anything. I don't understand how we're going to take this loan and it's just going to sit in our bank account. We're going to assume that people are going to abide by the rules, because right now we don't have anybody laid off. Zero. We don't have any impacts as assigned to PPP, which is mostly people laid off. Just to be frank, it's about people being laid off, not working. So
So 1 minute.
That's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you, Rob. And what I would say on behalf of the Finance
Excuse
Committee,
me, you can't rebuke people's comments. You need to move on to the next person who has their hands raised.
No,
You don't have this. You don't have this
I have
recourse.
the right to speak as the
No,
president.
you do not.
I do. I can't vote, but I can comment. My comment is,
You
this
do not have.
organization has been around for
You don't have
50
this.
years. And in those 50 years, especially in the last 10 years, we've had very responsible boards, finance committees, and executive committees that have followed the rules to the T on how we spent the money. And I do not think, even with newly elected officers, that that practice will change. Katie, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
Waiting for the second hand to start moving. So I'm going to get back to the two concerns I have. One is Leslie and Lee signing off on everything when it should be the executive director. Sorry, Sylvia.
Can I respond to that, Katie?
Well, like, do it after I finish, because I only have a minute, so do it after I finish.
I'll respond when you're done. Go ahead.
Okay. The other is to agree to a loan application which we have not reviewed is irresponsible. I realize you only could give what you could give, and I would suggest that we have another meeting. Sorry, everybody, I know you're wincing. Another meeting on Monday when you are able to work through the hurdles and obstacles to get that information to us so that we have seen everything. I also would like to see the motion that will create oversight, which will allow us to return the funds if
We're at that minute.
Oh, for God's sake.
Go ahead, Katie. Don't.
I don't know. I've lost my train of
Just
thought. I'm
finish your
sorry.
comment. You'd like the motion to do what?
I would like the motion to allow us to review complete documentation and return the funds in the event that we decide at June 30 when all our contracts are done. I realize we need to spend it in 8 weeks, and I'm wondering if we can spend it as soon as the contract is re-upped. I don't know how it works because I haven't reviewed the contracts.
Okay, couple thoughts. The bylaws say the president signs all contracts. It doesn't give any authority to the executive director, which is why I signed it instead of running it through Sylvia.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, she oversees everything, but if you look at the bylaws, which I did this morning because I was worried that maybe I wasn't in conjunction with the bylaws, it says the president does. And
Fine.
Lee, it doesn't even have signing authority, but of course, because we needed 2 signatures on the application, he signed with me because he was verifying the numbers. That's something he does and I don't do. And then the second thing about loan documentation, how about this? I have a suggestion for everybody. Let's take a vote on whether we want to approve the loan. And then if the answer to that is yes, then let's follow on with a motion about making the documents available to members, assuming the bank can do it, say by 3 o'clock tomorrow, so that I can go in and sign it, something like that. That's my suggestion. John Gibbon, you've been waiting. Would you like to go ahead, unmute yourself? John? There you go.
Sorry.
That's all right.
The Oversight Committee ought to be in a motion we act on today, I think.
Yeah.
That we will set up an Oversight Committee. Not volunteering for it. My circumstances does not put me in any position to be doing that, but I do feel that would be a wise thing to do. I shouldn't say anything. I do see some materials coming across for training sessions for attorneys next week. I haven't shut off all those CLE offers. And I noticed one that indicated that there is
John, that's the 1 minute.
pending drop dead date of the 14th. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'm going to call on Jackie, and then let's go to the motion. We'll have Janet read it again, and then we can vote on the motion. And let's vote by raising your hands if you're in favor of it, because I don't think I can do it audibly, quite frankly. I think we're going to need to do it by hands. Go ahead, Jackie, unmute yourself and make this will be the final comment on this.
Okay, so, this is the downside, right? The comment regarding the downside.
Right.
So the downside is that these funds have to be expended by June 30th, or payroll costs go through June 30th.
Wait, Jackie, it's 8 weeks from the time you get the money. So yes, I talked to the bank about it. So we go past June 30th to the 15th. If we get them on May 15th, we get to go through July 15th. I know that for a fact.
Did the SBA change?
Yes.
their
In
rules?
fact, what I sent you in the mail this morning, take a look. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so the downside, and it's not a big downside, is that the funds we cannot expend that fit the criteria will remain our funds, but they remain a loan, a 1% loan payable within 2-year period. And so that's the downside.
That's the 1 minute. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you. And really, actually, we have another choice. If we get to the July 15th and haven't used all the funds, we can return the unused funds to the SBA and then have a loan. There's a benefit because any loan that we have is so cheap at 1% and we have it for 2 years, right? But on the other hand, we can return any money that we don't use to the SBA and then we have no loan. All right, so Janet, would you read the motion?
Yeah. Katie, do you want to time me on this? You know, you can wave me. You can wave me down. There you go. There it is. Oops. Oh, I'm going to show myself too. Okay, I see you. Lee Bueller moved. The SWNI board approves the loan application and execution of the SBA loan document for $66,332 under the CARES Act Payroll Protection Plan by the President and the current treasurer. The loan shall be used in accordance with the federal PPP guidelines with the intent that the loan will become forgivable. If any portion of the loan is deemed unforgivable, the board can retain the money as a low-cost loan at 1%, repayable within 2 years of receipt of the money. The board has sufficient money in its reserve account to repay any non-forgivable loan funds. The board directs the president to form an oversight committee to oversee and report to the board on the SBA/PPP loan.
Would anybody like that reread to them? It's a long motion. Does anybody want it reread to them so you know what you're voting on? Okay, anybody? All right. Then I'm going to say all in favor of the motion that was just read to approve the loan application and execute the loan documents. Raise your blue hands. And Lee and Janet, if you'll count, that would be very helpful. I have, let's see.
I don't remember how to do that. Sorry.
Raise your hand in person.
Oh.
Right now.
I'm counting 12. Lee, how many are you counting?
And don't forget, George.
It's *9, just in case you didn't hear. *9 on your phone.
We're on the computer.
No, Marie is.
She's on a phone. I have 13 blue hands.
I count 13.
Okay. All those opposed to the loan, raise your blue hand. Lee, lower all the hands if you can, and then we'll go to raising them again. So wait a moment. Let's get all the blue hands off the radar.
So whatever reason my hand wasn't removed when you started this. So I had a raised hand for communication. So I would like the votes to be started again now that they've all been cleared.
Okay, are you saying you're changing your vote, Robert?
No, I'm saying that nobody cleared the hands before they started the vote. So I'm concerned that the votes aren't correct.
That's true. He didn't, or whatever.
All right.
Had hands
So,
up. Yeah.
so I'm just asking that you start it again.
I think his point is valid, and I also want you to note that you did not count all the hands where people had them up but had not raised their blue hands.
Okay.
But to get
we'll be more careful. All right, Lee,
Marie, do you know how to raise
blue
your
hands, and I'll look at the face hands, okay? All right, so all in favor of the motion to approve the loan, raise your blue hands. And then anybody who's not raising a blue hand, raise your hand in front of your face so I can count you. Is that Lee, you have yours up? George,
Yeah.
you have yours up?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. If I'm not raising my blue hand on there and I raise my hand here, am I voting against or am I voting not? I'm confused.
You're voting, if you raise your blue hand, you're voting for the loan. And George has his hand up, and as far as I know, he's the only one
So
that.
a little bit of time, Leslie, because.
And Kim has her hand up too, because she hasn't, the people that are putting their hands up haven't figured out how to raise their blue hands, right? Okay.
David Martin
So-
has his hand up. Murphy, did you have your hand up as well? Murphy, yes, has her hands up as well.
I counted, Murphy was on the participant list, so
Okay,
I came
okay.
up with 15, Steve.
In addition to which, Murphy as watershed votes yes, and Murphy as representative of neighborhood association as deemed by Maria Maitai says yes.
No, that's
Well,
not.
Maria's on the
that's not-
call.
Maria's on the
She's
call.
not.
She's
She
not.
Oh,
sent
she
me-
dropped it.
Doesn't matter. You can't do that.
Okay,
Excuse me.
She's
well,
not
you
present.
always ask.
She's not present. She can't vote.
That's cool, then it's just one vote. That's fine.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's gonna pass anyway, so who cares?
We have 15 votes for. Lee, will you lower all the blue hands? And then we're going to see votes for no.
They're not all lowered yet.
Right, I can see. All right, they're all lowered. Okay, let's have a blue hand vote for people that want to vote no on approving the loan.
Marie,
We
Is
have
it
Marie
motion
Tyball and Robert Lennox are voting against the loan. So we have 3 votes against. Okay, so we have 3 votes against. Does anybody wish to abstain?
Wait, lower hands, lower hands.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, shit.
Okay, I
Okay.
think all the hands are down. Does anybody want to abstain from the vote? Okay, I see no abstentions. All right, now, go back to your thoughts, Katie, and we've all got our mics open, so let's try to be as quiet as possible. You want to make a motion on the Oversight Committee. Are you prepared to do that?
Is that part of the agenda?
Anything to do with this loan is on the agenda. And we had a motion that said we would appoint an Oversight Committee. We can come back to it.
No, I'm
But-
just asking as a part of the agenda. That was a simple question.
Leslie, that motion said you would.
That's true.
name the
That's true.
oversight.
All right. All right. And I will, because I'm sure that the executive committee feels the same. We want to make sure if we get the money and the documents get signed, that we account for every penny of how the PPP was spent. And that we account on a regular basis for that. I don't know whether it'll be once a month, every 2 weeks, whatever it is. And the Oversight Committee will be part of that whole process. Okay. Anything else on the loan and approval or disapproval of the loan?
So who's the Oversight Committee? Did we establish one? Did I just drink too much?
The president is going to appoint the Oversight Committee, which will probably include all of our Finance Committee members because they are the ones that are looking at and reviewing the financial records, plus some additional individuals.
I volunteer.
Thank you, Katie.
Oh, good.
All right, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? You're adjourned, and thank you for your time on a Saturday night. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay.
My brother's here. I'm going.